This is ITV1.
America says it could fight without British troops. Blair's biggest gamble as MPs line up to oppose him.
This is so serious, we need you to consider your position.
Millionaire trial, the contestant who suspected the coughing code. And why Victoria's paying a fortune for her husband's autograph.
The ITV News with John Suchet.
Good evening. Tonight in the United States, America's plain-speaking Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld thought the unthinkable about Britain's role in attacking Iraq. He said America could go to war without Britain. That's not an option, according to Downing Street. The work goes on, meanwhile, at the UN on that second resolution. Tonight, the Security Council is debating Iraq, and Robert Moore is there. Robert.
Well, John, the Americans making crystal clear tonight they want a Security Council vote on a war resolution by the end of this week at the very latest. But tonight, no sign of a breakthrough and no sign that any inspired diplomacy may come to Mr. Blair's rescue.
British diplomats are in the fight of their lives to win votes at the UN Security Council. The suggested March the 17th deadline is in disarray. Smaller countries suggesting Saddam Hussein should be given another 45 days to comply. But that is a non-starter, according to the Americans, who are showing increasing impatience with the diplomatic paralysis. While the Russian ambassador told me Iraq should face no time limit. Is that sort of timeline over a month exactly?
I just said that any resolution which contains ultimatum and automatic use of force is not acceptable.
F-15Es drop munitions.
But the use of force is already underway. The Pentagon showing pictures today of a US air attack on an Iraqi air defense radar. Surprisingly, Donald Rumsfeld also suggested the role of British forces in a war was uncertain, given the political divisions in Britain.
Would the United States go to war without Great Britain?
Their situation is distinctive to their country, and they have a government that deals with a parliament in their way, distinctive way. And what will ultimately be decided is unclear as to their role. That is to say, their role in the event a decision is made to use force.
US and British troops are training together in the Kuwaiti desert for battle, but it now seems the exact mission given to UK forces is under discussion. It raises the possibility that they'll only be used in the immediate aftermath of an attack, effectively as peacekeepers. But senior US officials are making clear that whatever the diplomatic problems being encountered, American forces will act to topple Saddam Hussein, and that time is rapidly running out. Stepping up the psychological warfare, the US military also tested today the most powerful conventional weapon in history, nicknamed the mother of all bombs, larger even than the so-called daisy cutters that were used in Afghanistan. The new bomb could be used against Saddam's deepest underground bunkers.
Well, late tonight, back on the diplomatic front, some British officials reporting limited progress, suggesting that 2 or 3 of the undecided, wavering countries might now be backing the UK, Spanish and US resolution. But it still doesn't amount to a majority of Security Council opinion. And of course, John, there is still that French veto.
All right, thank you, Robert. And we go now to our political editor in Downing Street. Nick, that extraordinary claim from Donald Rumsfeld that America could go to war without Britain, what's the government saying about it tonight?
You're going to like this one, John. The official response, I stress the official response, is that well-known American diplomat Donald Rumsfeld was just being polite. He was acknowledging British domestic political concerns. But in truth, the transatlantic phone lines were red hot because this was the war rebels' dream, a revelation that Britain's not needed to be part of this war and could still pull out from being part of it. That's why corrections were made on both sides of the Atlantic, and they are reasserting here that Britain is and will remain part of any military planning.
If this is not the way out, is Mr. Blair still in deep trouble?
he is still in deep trouble. What was once absurd is now being openly discussed in Westminster, that he might lose his job as a result of this war. Why? Because the thing he dreamed of, the thing he promised that was possible, a second UN resolution, still looks as elusive as ever. As he awoke today, he had to think once again of those words from Jacques Chirac yesterday. A simple word: non. The morning after the night before, the night when France crushed the prospect of UN backing for a war with Iraq. Portugal's Prime Minister is a friend, but unlike Jacques Chirac, his vote doesn't count.
My concern is that if countries talk about using a veto in all sets of circumstances, the message that sends to Saddam is, you're off the hook.
Translated, that means France is being unreasonable and may have to be ignored. But
and that's why we've got to find that common ground that brings us back together again.
The Prime Minister's always insisted he wants and will get a second UN resolution. But if Jacques Chirac sticks to his guns and vetoes it, there are only two unattractive possibilities. Either the UN waiver is a one-over, Mr Blair is still defeated but claims a moral victory, or he fails to persuade them and suffers total defeat. Either way, diplomacy is not on the minds of these men, the Chief of the Defence Staff and the Defence Secretary attending what will soon be called the War Cabinet. Here too, dressed for court, the Attorney General, who advises on whether war is legal.
Is there any chance of a second resolution, sir?
Without it, these men may soon face the biggest fight of their political lives. Planning for that day, those in the wilderness for so long, Labour left-wingers are circulating a call for a special party conference.
I think large numbers of people in the party and the country are saying to Tony Blair, this is so serious, we need you to consider your position, which means consider your policy position and listen to the Labour Party. And if you can't do that, it does mean considering whether or not you have the right to lead this country and this party.
Yeah, well, a number of the usual suspects have opposed everything Tony Blair has done for 14 years are trying to jump in this bandwagon.
These visitors to number 10 can't be dismissed so easily. Britain's trade unions also say the UN is the only way.
Military action should only be contemplated if it has the full and unambiguous support of the United Nations.
Again and again, the same message. But is Tony Blair listening? Nick Robinson, ITV News, Westminster.
The oil-producing nations OPEC agreed tonight to help keep oil and petrol prices stable in the event of war. The countries that produce 60% of the world's crude oil said they would increase their supplies to fill any gaps caused by the conflict. There are reports tonight that Libya has accepted responsibility for the Lockerbie bombing and agreed to pay compensation to the families of the victims. Pan Am Flight 103 came down on the Scottish borders town in 1988, killing 270 people. The Foreign Office hasn't confirmed the reports. If they're true, it would mean the lifting of sanctions against Libya, which were imposed after the bombing. Still to come on the ITV News. Do you know how much this man will be taking from your wages next month? And the Beckham autograph that cost Posh a packet. Find out why when we come back. Welcome back. The coughing at the centre of the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire trial once again dominated the evidence today. Another contestant that night told the jury today he was sure his fellow competitor Tequin Whittock was using a system of coughing to help Army Major Charles Ingram to win the top prize. Joyce O'Harger reports.
Good morning, everybody. Major Charles Ingram and his wife Diana were at Southwark Crown Court as the jury heard how erratic coughing aroused suspicion on the ITV programme Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. The Crown is alleging that this man, college lecturer Tequin Whittock, who was a fastest finger contestant on the same programme, used 19 strategic coughs to help the Major answer questions. Another fastest finger contestant, Graham Whitehurst, told the court that by the time Chris Tarrant posed the jackpot question, he was fairly sure that the two men were in cahoots and that Mr. Whittock was coughing on the right answers. He said, "I was leaning forward, glaring at Mr. Whittock, thinking, 'Don't you dare, don't you dare.'" He said Mr. Whittock coughed twice on the £1 million answer. Mr. Whitehurst was asked if he was sure it was Whittock who coughed. He said he was 100% sure. The court also heard from the studio floor manager, Philip Davis. During the recording of the programme in September 2001, he said he became aware of Mr Whittock's throat problem. The floor manager, Mr Davies, said he could see Chris Tarrant, the Major and the other contestants. He was asked if he heard coughing. He said yes, and that it came from Tequin Whittock, who was in seat number 3. Describing the cough, Mr Davies said it was not frequent, as in uncontrolled coughing, which is why it was suspicious. He said there was no attempt to stifle it, which again was unusual. The Ingrams and Mr Whittock all deny they tried to deceive the programme makers in a bid to get the £1 million prize. The trial's expected to last 4 weeks. Joyce O'Haja, ITV News, Southwark Crown Court.
The actress Dame Thora Hird has had a stroke. The 91-year-old, famous, amongst other things, for the last of the summer wine, was taken ill at the weekend at her home in southwest London. She's being treated in a nursing home. Medical tests are being carried out to see how seriously she's been affected. Gordon Brown's rise in national insurance contributions comes into force less than a month from now. It was announced way back in last year's budget, but according to one survey, 60% of people still have no idea what impact it will have on their take-home pay. So, what impact will it have? Caroline Kerr's been looking at the figures.
Next month, many of us may feel a little poorer. That's because we'll be paying an extra 1% in national insurance payments to fund the health service.
Most of us may have forgotten that national insurance contributions are about to go up. And let's face it, 1% doesn't sound like a lot of money. But if you're on the average salary of about £23,000 a year, this is how much you'll be out of pocket. In fact, you'll be worse off by £184 every year.
We asked a top accountant to explain to people what it will mean for them. Our first volunteer was Nisha Devani, who's 23. She earns £27,000 a year and will be worse off by £224.
What do you feel about what you just heard?
I'm very upset. £224 is a lot of money. I mean, that's my holiday money gone.
The next person we spoke to was Baljinder Sahi, who earns £45,000. He'll be poorer by £403 a year. But not everyone will be out of pocket. People like Jason Lafferty, who's on a low wage and has children, could be better off because he should qualify for more generous tax credits. Jason is 31. He earns £14,500 a year. He will pay an extra £99 in national insurance, but the new tax credits should leave him £285 a year better off. After 90 minutes, our accountant concluded the national insurance rise just hasn't sunk in.
It seems to me that the vast majority of people have just forgotten all about it, and the whole thing will come as a surprise to them.
But we'll all know about it in a few weeks' time. Caroline Kerr, ITV News.
Prince Charles is to have a hernia operation later this month. It's thought the Prince, who's a keen gardener, injured himself while laying hedges at his Highgrove estate. The news makes a difficult week for the Prince even more uncomfortable. He's waiting for Thursday's potentially embarrassing report into claims of underhand dealings by his staff. Sport now. Arsenal's Champions League fate hangs in the balance after a 1-1 draw against 10-man Roma at Highbury. Patrick Vieira gave the Premiership champions an early lead with a powerful header from a corner kick. But despite having Francesco Totti sent off in the first half, the Italian side managed to snatch an equaliser. Arsenal should still qualify if they draw their final group game against Valencia next week. And you can see highlights of that match and Newcastle's game against Inter Milan here on ITV1 after the news. Before that, a different kind of football story. Victoria goes shopping and ends up paying out £150,000 for her husband's autograph. Stay with us.
Thanks, John. Good evening. I'm Philippa Thompson. Thanks for joining us for the latest headlines from Central News. Good evening. First tonight, the wife of a former soldier accused of murdering their 2 sons has claimed he forced her into prostitution and repeatedly threatened to kill the boys. Denise Williams said her husband Stephen constantly beat her. Eric McInnes was in court.
After 3 hours in the witness box, Denise Williams left Birmingham Crown Court this afternoon, having claimed she was the victim of years of domestic abuse. that culminated in the death of her 2 children. She was giving evidence against her husband, Stephen Wilson, who is accused of murdering their 2 sons. The prosecution claims 7-year-old Brad had his throat cut, 8-year-old Brett was stabbed with a screwdriver, both at the hands of their 44-year-old father, who had taken them to Hilltop Golf Course in Handsworth, Birmingham. It's claimed he murdered the boys to teach their mother a lesson she'd never forget. Denise Williams told the court she'd ended her relationship with Wilson 5 days before the boys' deaths, after years of beatings and despite constant threats he'd made to kill her and the children. But she agreed to meet the defendant and the children at this McDonald's in West Bromwich just hours before the boys were murdered. She claims Wilson repeatedly punched her in the face before driving off. Denise Williams told the jury after she was attacked, she took the tram from West Bromwich to Bilston. There she went to the flat of a friend. At 24 minutes past 8, she received a 12-second phone call from her husband, Steve Wilson. In it he said, "I've killed the kids and I'm trying to kill myself." Then the phone went dead. The defendant has claimed in police interview his wife, a prostitute, stole £2,500 from a massage parlour where she worked, and that gangsters then carried out the murders as an act of revenge. Eric McInnes, Central News.
An inquest jury has returned an open verdict on an animal rights activist who died while on hunger strike. Barry Horn from Northampton was jailed for 18 years in 1997. It followed a nationwide firebombing campaign that caused damage estimated at £3 million. He died in November 2001, 4 days after being admitted to Ronkswood Hospital in Worcester. Police have launched a nationwide appeal for a man they want to question about a murder last May. Jonathan Everton Bailey, who's also known as Famous, is thought to be from London. Detectives want to talk to him about the death of 26-year-old father of 2, Simon Medley, who was found stabbed outside a house in Prince Street at Plek in Walsall. A man questioned about the murder of Letitia Shakespeare and Charlene Ellis has been released. The teenage friends were shot at a New Year party in Aston in Birmingham. Charlene's twin sister and a friend were also injured in the attack. Police say the 19-year-old from Smethwick has been granted police bail. 2 men cleared of murdering a 13-year-old paperboy are challenging a ruling that they should pay board and lodging for the 18 years they spent in prison. Cousins Michael and Vincent Hickey were jailed in 1979 for shooting Carl Bridgewater at a farm near Stourbridge. They were freed by the Court of Appeal 6 years ago, but the Home Office says any compensation should be reduced to take into account expenses they would have incurred as free men. A schoolboy who survived a heart transplant and 40 operations has lost his fight for life. Robert Plotnick, seen here in 1996, died of heart failure at Birmingham Children's Hospital. The 13-year-old from Edgbaston was born with a hole in his heart. His parents say he brought joy and inspiration to everyone he met. A newlywed couple say their £300,000 house has become a home from hell. They moved into the brand new mock Tudor building 5 months ago and say they've had problems ever since. Joel Hills heard their tale of home-owning woe.
First the dream wedding in Antigua, then back home to the dream house in Shirley in Solihull. Or so they thought. Steve and Erica Mills moved in last November to a Redrow home that was billed as an exclusive property. So far, they say, it's been anything but. Outside, the brickwork on the garage is uneven, the drain pipe isn't straight, and the mortar and bricks in places are discoloured. Inside, the stairs are falling away from the wall, the banister is too close to it, many of the architraves are badly fitted, and neither of the toilets flush properly.
Sold to us as a luxury house, you know, a dream house basically, and we fell in love with it when we saw it, and we thought everything was going to be fantastic.
Steve and Erica are not alone in having problems with their Redrow home. Number 61 have been told a design fault means they can't have a gas fire in their lounge. At number 55, they're so fed up, they're selling up just 10 months after moving in. The problems here, the garage door and the roof tiles. At number 67, Redrow are in the process of refitting the bay window, something number 71 wish the company would do for them. The Seatons say they've had more than 100 problems with their new home. Redrow declined to be interviewed, but in a statement said relatively minor snagging issues can be expected in a new home. The company was not aware of all the problems, but will be dealing with them as swiftly as possible. Joel Hills, Central News.
Football and just one result from tonight's action. In Division 3, Shrewsbury Town drew 3-3 away to Wrexham. That's it from the night team. We're back at 6:30. Bye-bye.
Hello again. In a moment, why Victoria Beckham ended up paying a fortune for her husband's autograph. First, the headlines. The US Defence Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said tonight that America could go to war without British help. Tony Blair's facing the first serious challenge to his leadership because of his handling of the Iraq crisis. And the US military has tested its biggest ever conventional bomb, 21,000 pounds of explosive. An autographed photo of David Beckham was priced at a modest £65,000 when his wife, Victoria, saw it in a shop window. She ended up paying a fortune for it today in slander damages to the shopkeeper and legal costs. As Helen Wright explains, Mrs. Beckham had denounced the autograph as a fake when it wasn't.
2 years ago, Victoria Beckham left this Kent shop empty-handed, but now she's facing a huge bill. She claimed a signed photo of her husband in the store was fake. Customers heard and newspapers repeated the false allegation. The owner of the store sued for slander. Tim McManus and his family have now won damages and an apology from Mrs. Beckham, who accepted they were reputable traders. She's also offered them official merchandise signed by David. Would that go on sale, I asked.
What will I be doing with that, Michael? The merchandise.
I'm sorry, we've agreed to say absolutely nothing except what was said in the statement in open court.
Autographs of the rich and famous have become increasingly collectible, with David Beckham's among the most popular, this expert told me.
We seldom obtain examples of it, but when we do, they don't stay in the shop window for very long. You can be sure that they'll be snapped up very quickly.
Mounted and framed, this David Beckham autograph could fetch about £90. The signed photo Victoria Beckham saw was on sale for £65. But questioning its authenticity today cost her £55,000 in damages, more than £100,000 in the owner's legal costs, and of course her own solicitor's expenses.
Victoria also said she was sorry the McManuses suffered damage and hoped their business would continue successfully. Helen Wright, ITV News at the High Court.
And finally tonight, a British squaddie serving in the Gulf has made a dramatic 3,000 miles, 16-hour dash home to see his baby being born. Unfortunately, no one told little Katie, who arrived just before he did in hospital in Watford. Sergeant Steve Perry didn't mind, nor did his wife. She was just pleased they both arrived safely. He is due back in Kuwait on Monday. There'll be more on that statement from the US Defence Secretary Donald Rumsfeld on the ITV News channel, but from the ITV News team. Good night.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by PowerGen. PowerGen. Power in good hands.
Hello, good evening. Well, our weather's shaping up quite nicely and settling down over the next few days. First, though, some bothersome cloud to get rid of tonight, and that's giving off wintry showers over the highlands there. Now, during the course of the night, where that sinks ever southwards, getting into this sort of position by morning, colder air tucking in behind, so it's frosty conditions for Scotland tonight. Now into tomorrow morning, starting straight away with the south, there's that band of cloud, the odd spot of rain here and there. It doesn't last, moves off the scene fairly swiftly, and it settles into a nice bright day, dry, broken cloud, plenty of sunshine around. Even so, temperatures are a tad disappointing because we've a bit of a stiff northerly breeze affecting those temperatures. Here's a confirmation of that wind, so feeling cold even though we've high pressure gloriously in charge. That's all from me.
PowerGen. Power in good hands.